Hey guys, Mr. E here, and today it's time for a time-honored tradition on our channel, which is Yap videos, where I'm going to talk and sort of debate with myself both sides of an issue. Now, this is something I've done previously with the Ogren, whether or not the Ogren is too powerful for the game that he is currently in, and it's something I'll end up doing again with the same question with Arbites in the future. So if that's something you're interested in, mayhaps you should subscribe to the channel. But today, I want to debate the merits of dog versus dogless gameplay. I think both of them have very, very strong upsides, and I mean, the class is very strong, as you've probably realized, but these two methods of playing are at odds with each other, right? You can't be both dog and dogless, which I'll call Douglas from here on out because I think it's really funny. So I wanted to kind of quantify what you get from both of these sides. So, on the left side of the screen, you'll see the dog havers, and this will be the list of benefits you get from having a dog. On the right side of the screen will be Douglas, anything that you get from going Douglas on a mission. And I want to start first with the dog side of the issue. I think that a lot of players, when they first picked up Arbites or were seeing trailers of him, or before, especially before any content came out from us content creators, leaking this stuff to you guys, I think a lot of people thought the dog was going to be useless, and far from, right? The dog is very, very reactive. In fact, he's proactive in a lot of situations and can get ahead of what you're already thinking about doing. You'll see him pounce targets that you were about to swing at, and you're like, good, I don't have to worry about that. The dog is very, very useful in just a passive sort of way. He also provides you some safety against a few disablers, specifically dogs, enemy dogs. He will knock them off of you. He can also knock chargers off of you if they've grabbed you and are about to slam you or are slamming you. He can even intercept them when they're coming in, so that's really nice. And of course, everyone knows the spinny ride on the chaos spawn. If you get grabbed, there's a dog at your side. The chaos spawn will whip around like a maniac trying to knock that dog away. And all of that means that you spend a lot less time crowd controlled, and crowd control is death in this game. As we'll talk about when we get to the Douglas side of things, crowd control means death for both parties involved, both enemies and friendlies. So the less time we can spend crowd control, the better, and the dog does free us from a few of these instances. He acts as a miniature teammate in that way. The other thing that I think is, well, one of the other things that I think is very, very valuable about the dog is that he is a targeted removal on any target in the game, especially if you choose his voltaic jaws augment. That augment will stun lock any enemy, including crushers or reapers or whatever it is. You point him at that target and he will go on them until they're dead. Now, it may take him a minute, depending on your specialization and what points you put into the dog, but especially if you're going for that bottom left keystone, he will kill the target fairly quickly and then return to his usual order of operations. And I think this is a very, very valuable thing, being able to stagger any enemy at any time. You could say, okay, I need this bulwark to be opened up so I can come in and land a smack on his head. I need this crusher to stop following me around, get on him. I need that reaper to stop shooting from a distance, or that trapper that just ran away into the horde. Go chase him down and finish him off. So having that sort of targeted removal where you don't have to think about it does free up your brain to do other stuff, right? And that's something that's in very short supply in Darktide, obviously. You can't do a million things at once. That is one of the skills that, very, very good players at this game train themselves for a long time to do, is think about many different threats that are coming at from different angles, think about your positioning, and the dog takes a little bit of that mental load off of you. He kind of acts like a free bot in that way. He's like he makes the RBDs play like it's 1.3 characters. You have you that you're controlling, and then you have the dog who will just passively do stuff and contribute and keep the area safe and knock allies out of holds and all sorts of good stuff. So he's just passively very, very useful to have around. And let's talk about the other stuff that you can get from having the dog. Firstly, and one that will be mirrored in the Douglas category, he has the dog explosion, right? The dog explosion, especially if you're using bolter bleed explosions or bolt gun bleed explosions, is a very, very good blitz ability, right? It's a huge stagger, solid damage, and it's on a 1 minute cooldown, so you get 30 plus of them per game. It just requires that micromanagement of getting the dog into the right position at the right time, which can be finicky. But you get to have the dog and you get a blitz with a 1 minute cooldown, which is like the best of both worlds. That's one really big sell for the dog. Then the bottom left keystone is probably my next biggest sell. That keystone, it can work without the dog, right? You can still get the marked targets and you can still eliminate them yourself, but when the dog exists, he claims those kills for you and therefore gives you the buffs just passively. So if you've been focusing on, say, the boss for a little bit and you haven't been able to turn and kill any of those blued out targets, then the dog can actually be killing those blue targets instead and giving you the crit buffs, giving you the cooldown buffs, all that stuff that you need. I think it is the strongest keystone in the class. It's pretty close. It's like S tier to the right side keystone's A tier, I think. But yeah, that's a very, very strong keystone. It gets stronger, a lot stronger, when you have the dog at your side. And then finally, the amount of buffs that are associated with specifically having the dog. So there are buffs in the bottom left keystone for movement speed, which is a huge, huge valuable stat for anytime the dog pounces. We also have something on the left side of the tree above the part of the team keystone that gives you 20% toughness damage reduction anytime you kill a pounce target, and then just all of the other myriad buffs in the tree that activate on kill or on stagger, and the dog can contribute to all of those. So he's a really good buff bot at keeping you and your team buffed up with various good things. And I think that's just about everything that the dog is very useful for. He is just awesome to have around. He's very, very good. I think that when you're at a low to medium skill, the dog is definitely the choice. But I wanted to have this discussion because I understand that at a higher level of play, that Douglas mode becomes ever more tempting. And this is something that players were saying going in, is like, oh boy, I can't wait for that, Pinnacle Havoc build to just completely leave the dog at home because the dog will be useless. I don't think that's the case. I think the dog is still definitely useful in certain builds, but you can't, you can't look down on the buffs you do get out of Douglas. First of all, you get some toughness damage reduction, which is valuable. This class doesn't have a whole lot of sources of toughness damage reduction. It is kind of light on that, but that's because the class has insane toughness regeneration. It has like 15 different ways of regenerating toughness. It's kind of like Ogren in that regard, and if you give him a lot of toughness damage reduction, it becomes incredibly hard. Why did I say it like that? Incredibly hard to actually put this guy down. That, paired with all the stagger potential that he has, it gets increasingly hard for enemies to actually get a hit on the guy, let alone break his toughness. So that is one big thing that this offers. The second really big thing is that attack speed. Attack speed is an incredibly valuable stat. It gives you both offense and defense. Faster weapons in this game are almost always better because, one, critical strikes are very powerful in Tide games. So the more often you can attack, the more often you can fish for those good critical strikes. So weapons like Tac Axe, which were already very good, have been buffed even more. And now, like with that extra 10% attack speed, you shred enemies. And it also lowers the window between when you are attacking, which means you have more time to squeeze in attacks and then block or dodge at the appropriate timing. So it lowers that window where you can be attacked, especially because you might be able to stagger enemies. Very likely you're going to be able to stagger enemies with your attacks, and therefore they won't be able to retaliate at all. So the faster you can attack, the more likely the enemies are to get staggered, and less likely they are to be able to hit you. This is something we see time and time again with the Ogren, right? The Ogren is so dominant with Mark III Bully Club because you can just slap, or like literally slap, or club them with the club so much, so fast that they never even get to do anything to you. So that is a very strong point here. You get 10% damage. I think this is probably the weakest part of the talent, pretty obviously. 10% damage isn't nothing, but it's not anything to really write home about. But it is 10% general damage, so that applies to all your sources of damage, which is quite potent, both range, melee, and I want to go on a limb here and say it's bleeds. I don't think that's true. I think it has to be... No, it is true. It is true. Bleeds are scaled by damage, because I think a fire team... Burns are. Yeah, so fire team on veteran scales your damage. So yes, it is true. That will scale your dot damage as well 4 bleeds, and shocks, and all that good stuff. And then the real money in this talent is the grenade buffs, right? 1 grenade every 60 seconds, which, as we addressed previously, the dog havers, the dogful brigade, has access to this too with the dog explosion, albeit a little bit more finicky. But with the Douglas keystone, you can generate 1 grenade of any type, of either RBD's grenades or the shock mine. The shock mine is as good as a win this engagement button, right? You put it down in the right spot and your team fights around it, and it just instantly makes your life like that much easier. It does take a while to set up. I think for my money, having 5 charges of the RBD's grenade, which you can then pick up, you can pick up packs in the wild and you regenerate 1 every minute. Back in the day, we used to say that shredder grenades were S tier. What is this then? Shredder grenades have 4 charges. If you take the extra talent that gives you just 1 extra charge, this is a talent that gives you an extra charge and regenerates. That's 2 different talents on veteran. And these grenades will have a maximum of 5 charges, and they are just so perfectly synergistic with this class, right? Because this class thrives on staggered enemies. And what do these grenades do? Instantly to everything in their radius, they stagger it. These things are aggressive. They are also defensive because they can act as a smoke bomb and just throw it at your feet or throw it at the wall of crushers that's surrounding you on all sides, and you instantly got a heavy stagger that can get you out of that situation or put you on the upper hand. So that ability to regenerate those grenades, it is better than the dog explosion because you can pick up the packs in the level. And when you have grenades that are as impactful, no pun intended, I always do this with the fucking RBD's grenade, but the RBD's grenade has 5 charges. And when you can pick up a grenade that's that good and you get 5 charges for every pack and you're regenerating 1 every minute, that in itself is really, really crazy. So you'll see high skill players, in fact, I got a good portion of my perspective on this from Candones. Here's his channel. Check him out. He's a very high skill player. He knows what he's fucking talking about. He runs these impact grenades when he's running Lone Wolf, and you see him use them at the appropriate times, and they have a huge, I keep saying fucking impact, but they have a huge impact on the winning engagements because of the effect that they have on staggering enemies and then following up on that stagger by just killing everything before it even gets a chance to retaliate. So there are merits on both sides here. I think ultimately what it comes down to, right, is how hard do you want to try? If you are a player like me who is probably at the 75th, 80th percentile, well, I don't know, I play Havoc 40, so I guess I'm probably kind of good at the game. I'm so blind to it at this point, but I'm a lazy player. That's why I make powerful builds, is so I can play lazy, play with the most powerful build and play lazy. I think the dog is good for me because the dog deals with things and I don't have to worry about it, right? It's kind of passively always there. It can stop me from just a lazy, missed dodge on another dog or a charger or whatever, get me free from a chaos spawn that I should have dodged anyway. So it's good for me in those situations, and I think it'll be really good for a lot of players at that middle part of the skill progression, especially because on lower difficulties, his damage is just going to instantly kill tons of elites and stuff like that. When you get into those higher ranks, though, and you really start to flex your own personal skill, your own personal contribution to any given firefight is going to far exceed the dog's. And therefore, getting that extra damage, that extra attack speed, and especially those grenades that you can use using your own real human being brain that decides exactly when and where that needs to go, that is a very impactful tool on its own. So I think at extremely high levels of play, we start to see the Douglas take precedence, which is not to say that you can't have a dog build in Havoc 40 or whatever. It's obviously very viable. The last thing I wanted to touch on is how the keystones and the abilities interplay with Dog and Douglas. Sorry, I almost said Douglas. The real interplay going on here is the bottom left keystone, Execution Order. Execution Order offers 50% cooldown regeneration, and it's way better when you have the dog at your hand. So the left two, both Castigator's Stance and Nuncio Aquila, both have long cooldowns for impactful abilities, but the cooldowns are so long you almost by necessity want that node underneath Execution Order that gives you 50% cooldown reduction. And that, I think, in itself lends to choosing Dog, so that you can get that cooldown reduction when you're going for either of those abilities. If you are going to go Douglas, the choice is fairly obvious. You would want to go right side ability, hold the line, and then, I think that's what it's called, right? The charge, the fucking Kruber charge. And then either the right or the middle keystone, probably the right one. The right one seems to be very, very strong. And that will also, like, you know, produce results there. But that's because that cooldown is so low that you don't have to worry about having that additional cooldown reduction. It starts at 20 seconds, right? So that's sort of my take on things. I think that both obviously have their merits. This class is just very, very strong. So, you know, with sufficient skill, these sort of conversations become pointless. But for many players, they are wondering, where's your Douglas build? Why haven't you put out a Douglas build yet? I wanted to focus on the dog for the first couple of days because it is my preferred way of playing. But don't worry, Douglas builds are on the way. I'll have a few out for you this week. And that's about all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the yap. I hope you enjoyed the gameplay in the background. And I'll see you next time. Mystery out. Bye.